Good morning and welcome to Understanding Temper Tantrums. I'm Megan Walsh. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health at Encompass here in Snoqualmie, Washington. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about my understanding of temper tantrums and what they really mean, what neuroscience tells us, and how we can best approach those kind of tough situations in our families. So, what is a temper tantrum? When a child is having a tantrum, it is really their subconscious way of communicating that they have a need. They need or they want something from the safe adult that's around them or the environment that's around them. It's telling us that their brain is not in thinking mode anymore. It's in survival mode. A tantrum is telling us that they have exceeded all of their available coping skills in that moment. Their innate survival skills have kicked in to try to ensure that they get their need met in whatever way possible. And it's really important that we keep in mind that they are not capable of thinking, planning, and prioritizing in these moments. Sometimes it can look like they are, but they really aren't. So it's important that we look at it through a different kind of lens. So I'm going to show this video. It's actually from the Trauma Center in the United Kingdom. It's called the Triune Brain. First of all, I'm going to show it because there's absolutely nothing cuter than adorable kids with really adorable accents. But the real reason that I like to show this video is because it's an easy way to understand that what happens in the brain during a behavioral tantrum is overload or overwhelm, and it isn't willful behavior. So it's our body and our brain's stress response system just getting off track a bit. So we're going to watch a cute video about that real quick.
We are going to tell you about our brains. Our brain has 3 parts.
The front bit is called the prefrontal cortex.
It helps us to think, analyse, be reasonable, rational, and reflect on stuff. Some people call this the upstairs brain.
This middle bit is called the limbic brain. It looks after our emotions, memory, and relationships.
This back bit is the most primitive brain.
It makes sure we breathe, poo and wee,
and helps our heartbeat.
And has the threat response inside it.
Some people call that the downstairs brain. When we get frightened, our brain stem acts and makes us flight, fight, or freeze.
Hormones, which are cortisol and
adrenaline,
start pumping around our body.
And that makes us full of energy and strength.
So we wiggle,
Fiddle, giggle, and we can't sit still. We also either flight, run,
or we fight, which makes us get told off.
or we can freeze and look like we are not listening.
But actually what is happening is that we are frightened.
And our body is trying to warn us and protect us.
That's the bit that means we can think, reflect, and be reasonable. And the bit that helps us talk.
So that's why when we feel frightened, sometimes grown-ups think we are being naughty. So if we saw a big bear, we won't be able to stop and wonder what kind of bear it is, because then we'd be eaten.
All our behaviour is actually communication.
Because no child wants to be thought of as naughty.
Often, we just feel frightened and we can't use our words, because our brains are preoccupied and trying to survive.
Right. So those kids were able to give us a little bit of an idea of what it looks like in the brain when our kids' nervous systems are overwhelmed and they're tantruming. And so I wanted us to look a little bit at why we are so triggered by that, because we are often. I've worked with a lot of parents, and never once have I met one that really wanted to mess up their kid. Never once has someone said, oh boy, I really hope I pass on the hurts and problems that I have to this little one. We all want desperately to be good parents. And when our kids seem out of control, it lights up our own nervous systems. And that's actually the opposite of what's helpful, because then we go into unthinking mode. We have to learn to see tantrums for what they are, just our child's way of communicating to us that they need help. And then we can respond in loving, calm, nurturing ways until their nervous system soothes enough in response to our calm nervous system to be able to try again with our support. So we want to be aware of the things that make us react instead of respond. We might feel embarrassed or ashamed. We might feel judged by others. This is really common, especially around the holidays. You're seeing a lot of family members and friends that you don't normally see or you haven't seen in a while. We worry about what this behavior might look like in the future. I know I'm someone who can really catastrophize things. I start to look at a little behavior and start to think about, oh my gosh, when they become an adult, this and this and this is going to happen. When in reality, it's not really that big of a deal, but it feels big in the moment. We may not know how to respond. We may feel really incapable and helpless at that moment, and that doesn't feel good. And so then we react. We may also be hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. We use the acronym HALT to describe that. And that's often one of the things that I recommend for parents. If they are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, they're not going to respond well, and either is their child. So if you can address those things first, that can also be really helpful. So let's look at some common beliefs about tantrums. So often people think that tantrums are the result of not enough discipline, the child's out of control, it's bad parenting, or they're only acting like that for attention. It may be a stage. Could be, people talk about the terrible 2s and 3s. Those are some of my favorite ages, honestly. But they can be challenging because kids are learning and growing and figuring out new things. But when we respond to tantrums from this viewpoint, we often make things much worse for everybody. We are reactive, we feel disrespected, we move away from connection instead of leaning into supporting our child's big emotions. And we want to give the message that we are big enough, we are strong enough, we are wise enough to handle whatever they are struggling with. And they're not alone with that big emotion. We become much more punitive. We give consequences that often our kids can't even process in that moment because they can't access their thinking brain. So if I do this, then this happens, doesn't even come into play in a child's brain when they are escalated. So what does neuroscience tell us? It tells us that tantrums are protective, just like you saw in that video. It tells us that our nervous systems are wired to protect us in times of danger. And often our innate danger detection system just gets a little bit off track. Things feel fearful. They feel dangerous when they're not. When our needs aren't met and we don't know how to get them met, that's when our nervous systems kick in. And the baby might notice, or a young child might notice that something feels wrong. They express the need by crying, screaming, or sometimes in the most extreme, they shut down completely. And then a caregiver comes, they feed them, they soothe them, they attend to the need, and then the baby feels regulated. And that cycle happens thousands and thousands of times in an optimal experience for a young child. And so they start to notice, I can do this, I can handle this, I'm capable, somebody stronger, wiser, and caring is going to come take care of me. And so when we relate and react to our child's expressing a need in an extreme way with shutting it down, they don't get that experience of going the full circle. They don't get that experience of knowing it's okay to have these huge feelings and not know what to do with them. So then that's going to increase tantruming behavior. So we really want to make sure that we're giving them that whole experience of being uncomfortable, expressing the need, and then being met with a calm, soothing caregiver so that they can help to regulate them and get them back on cycle. So what has been most helpful for me and many of the parents I work with is really getting to a place of curiosity, wondering about what could be causing these big feelings, not making the big feelings negative, just wondering about them, wondering what might help regulate me in that moment if I was feeling something like that, so that I can use my thinking brain to help regulate my child. Never in the history of ever has a dysregulated, upset adult regulated a dysregulated, upset child. So we have to take responsibility for being the adult, being bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, and helping them to regulate. So again, I want you to think about triggers like hunger, thirst, maybe a need for stimulation. Maybe they're bored. Maybe they are lonely. We want to think about maybe there's too much stimulation, maybe the lights or the heat or the scratchy blankets. Maybe they're tired or they just don't feel good. Tantrums are not willful misbehavior. The child needs soothing and patience and connection most of all in these moments. So in times of stress, we automatically revert to parenting the way that we were parented, unless we can intentionally make other choices. And many of us didn't have our emotional outbursts met by a calm, connected parent. And so that response does not often come naturally to us. It's really important that we notice when these situations come up and carefully change the messages that we're telling ourselves about the whys and the what's next. If my child does something and the message I tell myself is, he's being disrespectful, he doesn't care what I think, he just wants his own way, I'm going to react in a way that's probably not helpful. But if I get curious about, is he hungry? Is he tired? Is he feeling lonely? Is he feeling overwhelmed? I respond in a very different way. It's also incredibly helpful if we can be prepared. Having snacks and water and soothing items easily accessible can go a long way towards making some really important changes. It's important for us to recognize that parental calm is what the child needs. We have to do our own work to be able to gently give our kids what they need. But the important thing is that we're setting the foundation for our kids to know how to deal with their upset as they get older in healthier ways. So again, manage your self-talk, build a community of safe people that you can connect with, and know what works for you and for your child, and be prepared in advance. For me, sometimes a water bottle, an ice pack can be really helpful. That can kind of help bring me back into my body when I'm getting really excitable and upset. A protein snack can help to balance out mood. Movement, a fidget, a weighted item. Sometimes when kids are tantruming after school, they're having trouble with that transition, leaving somewhere and going somewhere different. I've often advised parents to get a little exercise ball and kind of deflate it a little bit and shove it in that space underneath the car seat and the seat in front of it. And then that child can kick and get that energy out in a way that doesn't become dangerous for anybody else. So there's ways that you can let the child get their need met, and it's helpful instead of harmful. It can also be helpful to keep a journal of when tantrums usually occur and try to recognize those patterns so that you can work proactively to provide a connected, healthy outlet for completing that stress cycle of emotion. So teaching kids that healthy processing of emotion is okay and natural goes a long way towards reducing tantrums. We want to help them see that it's absolutely okay and expected and wonderful to have a big emotion. And sometimes your body gets flooded with stress hormones, and you have to do something to get rid of that. You could do it through a tantrum, or you could do it through a brisk walk with a friend, or a sob fest, or a pillow fight, or wandering through the woods connecting with nature. Research shows us that the best way to increase resilience and emotional health is by preparing exertion, either physical or emotional exertion, with connection. So it could be walking and talking. It could be hugging and crying. It could be a pillow fight and laughing. It could be walking on a path through nature and looking at the trees and connecting with the world around you. So everybody has a different way that works for them to get that energy out. Sometimes I'll even talk with parents about prescribing a tantrum. Maybe you know that every Thursday after dance class, your child loses it completely. So on the way to dance class, you might say, you know, I've noticed that after dance class is really hard every week. So when we get in the car, we are both going to stomp our feet and yell as loud as we can together. So you're pairing that exertion with connection and allowing your child to get that energy out. So prescribing the tantrum can be a really helpful intervention too. So you want to think about what works for you, what works for your child, get yourself to a place of calm, and then move on. So during a tantrum, comforting touch, gentle sounds, calming presence are most impactful. There are some kids that need some time alone, and we want to be honoring of that. I have one kiddo who, if I left him alone in a tantrum, it would escalate. I have another kiddo who, if I don't leave him alone in a time of emotional upset for a little bit while letting him know I'm at a distance and available, then he would escalate. So you want to be aware of what works for your child and try something and see what works and see what doesn't. We want to avoid using a lot of words. When kids are escalated, and actually just when humans are escalated, there is a piece of the ear that actually shuts down. And so sometimes it can seem like the child isn't even hearing us. And the reality is they're probably not. So we want to avoid talking and give nonverbal cues of safety, like sitting down, like deep breathing, like a safe, calm, caring facial expression. We want to avoid isolating that child, punishing, or teaching in that moment. There'll be plenty of time for teaching afterwards. When that child is calm and regulated, and it might need to wait till the next day or even a couple days later. But when that child is in a calmer place, then you want to get curious together and wonder together, what was going on there? I'm just not sure. You don't want to say, what was going on with you yesterday when you behaved badly? But you might say, wow, yesterday was tough. That was so hard. I wonder what was going on. And just think about it together and wonder together. Get curious. And then you can move on to a plan when you have a few more clues about what was happening. So to wrap up, you're going to consistently explore what's below the surface. Instead of reacting to specific behaviors that you see, we want to look for what might be underneath that behavior. What is that behavior trying to tell us? What are they trying to communicate? We also want to give kids the benefit of the doubt. They behave well when they feel well, both physically and emotionally. We all have bad days, and sometimes we all just need to have a bad day, and that's okay. We want to make sure that we're doing our own emotional work as adults and as parents and caregivers. We have to unpack our history and how that impacted us in order to be really available for our kids. You also might want to look at having an OT evaluation, that's occupational therapy, to uncover some sensory sensitivities that might be just poking your child all throughout the day. And then finally they have a complete tantrum because they can't take it anymore. So sensory sensitivities can be an important thing to look at. We also want to look at our own expectations. Sometimes we have expectations for our kids that aren't developmentally appropriate, that maybe are being put on us from other people or other systems that just aren't fair or reasonable. So we want to look at our expectations. We want to focus on meeting our own needs, as I said earlier, so that you can be available to meet your child's needs. So focus on meeting your own needs and your child's needs. And then remember that warm connection in any circumstance supports learning and development. So that really needs to be our focus. I've listed some wonderful resources here for anyone who's interested. The first link is a great video I've used to teach kids about the brain and what happens when we get upset. I've used it successfully with about kindergarten age and up. The first video that I actually showed in this workshop could be used as well. I've used that a couple of times. The next link is for Dr. Dan Siegel, who's the author of really great books like The Whole Brain Child, No Drama Discipline, and The Yes Brain. Mona Delahook's website is next, and she is an absolute wealth of information and perspective on parenting topics. I've also listed Ross Greene's book, The Explosive Child, and that can be helpful for kids who are really easily frustrated and have a lot of difficulty with flexibility. The last link here and the QR code are for Encompass's online learning system. There are modules there for families to increase their understanding of everything from potty training to school refusal to child development to parental burnout. There's lots of different modules there, and they are available free for families to look at in your own time, in your own space. Please take a second to check that out if it sounds interesting to you. I really appreciate you taking time to be with me today, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, concerns, or we can be helpful in any way. Have a wonderful rest of your day.